Shibil Radka stood at the gate. From below came Mustafa, folk song Shibil, the fearsome brigand, whom gendarmes and captains of the guard hunted high and low, was coming down from the mountain to surrender. Tomorrow the news would spread everywhere. Who would believe it? Shibil cared little about that. He was hurrying, and his mind was on something else. He was thinking how, a month or two before, from the high peaks of the blue stones, where among the eagles' nests his own brigand's nest lay, he had seen women coming along the road below. It was not in brigand custom to bother women, nor was there any place for women in a brigand's heart. But Shibil had broken many laws, and no longer knew, nor wished to know, what was sin and what was not.
Women, here in the midst of the gendarmes,
he thought to himself.
Now that's fine plunder.
And he rose, not the least bit concerned where his curiosity was leading him. The brigands followed him, laughed, and their teeth flashed like those of hungry wolves. They descended, passed through the forest, which had not yet come into leaf, and came out onto the road in the heart of the gendarmes. This was the most terrifying place. Here the road plunged deep into the ravine, wound along one side and then the other, tracing two arcs, two hoops of a trap in which many men had met their death, and as they had done before, the brigands blocked the road and stood there, fearsome, bearded, draped in black Albanian cloaks, bristling with weapons. The women appeared at the bend, and the moment they saw them, froze in their tracks. Then they scattered, some downhill, some uphill, and began to run, but their legs buckled under them, and they only staggered in place like wounded birds. Faint with terror, they fell to the ground and wept. The brigands were unmoved. They did not even glance at them. Their attention was elsewhere. One woman still stood on the road, young, beautiful, and how she was dressed. A blue silk frock, a bodice of scarlet satin, a bright Holy Land apron, silver belt clasps, and around her neck heavy strings of coins, row upon row of thick gold pieces, rubies and Mahmoudiye coins. Where had she set out, so finely adorned? To a wedding? Was the father who had let her loose alone in these mountains mad? Shibil stepped closer. The girl gazed at him calmly and straight in the eye. A sharp line had settled between her braided brows, and her scarlet lips trembled.
"Hey!"
she cried, and her delicate voice rang strangely amid the weeping of the women.
"Be on your way and mind your own business. Aren't you ashamed? What do you want with a band of women?"
At these words, the brigands, who had not taken their eyes off the gold coins on her neck, lunged toward her, reaching out their sinewy arms from afar. Shibil waved his hand and stopped them. Then he turned, drew himself up to his full height, and looked down at the girl, measuring her with his eyes. What a white face, and slender at the waist, with skirts spread wide, like a doll, and what courage! His eyes gleamed with mirth. Laughter swelled inside him, but the girl had laughed out loud before he could. Her face lit up. She grew even lovelier, and now one could see that her eyes were blue and her teeth white. Shibil stared at her in wonder. What manner of devil was this? How everything that followed came about, Shibil himself could not understand. The women recovered, and, though still timid as does, gathered around him. The mountains seemed to brighten. Down below, the river could be heard murmuring. In the forest, a bird sang out. Shibil himself had sat down on a rock, smiling, listening to the girl's chatter. What was she saying? God alone knows. Words that mean nothing, words that are forgotten. But how her eyes shone, and how pleasant it was to look at her. Off to the side, tamed as if by some miracle, the brigands sat in a cluster, calmly smoking.
"So you're Veliko Kahaya's girl,"
Shibil was saying.
"Rada, they call you. How did your father let you go? And all dressed up with gold coins, with those strings of Mahmoudiya. I'll take them."
"Oh, you'll take them. Why don't you give me more? I haven't got enough. Just look,"
she cried, pointing with her hand.
"Just look how your sleeve is torn. Wait, I'll sew it up."
Shibble looked at his hand, resting on the stock of his rifle. The red broadcloth had indeed torn, and before he could tell whether she was joking or not, he saw her right in front of him, saw the down on her white face, her red lips, and when she glanced at him, her eyes bathed him in soft, sweet light. She was smiling and looking at him mischievously, gathering up the torn sleeve, and in her lips she held a needle and thread.
Don't move!
She scolded him.
I'm starting. And put something in your mouth so I don't sew up your wits along with it. At least then you'd still have them.
Everyone laughed.
Listen,
Rada went on.
you ought to get married so there's someone to mend you. You can't go around ragged like this, like a
what?
gypsy.
Shibble's brow darkened. The women glanced at each other nervously.
Get married,
Said Shibble.
but the girls don't want me.
Oh, they'll want you. A fine bachelor like you.
Well then, you take me.
Who? Me? Runs through the valley, ties his sandal. What is it? A brigand. No, I don't need that. I don't want a brigand.
Shibble's brow darkened again. Rada caught the pleading look of the women and quickly tried to mend her words.
Maybe.
I'll take you. You just have to ask Veliko Kahaya.
And after a short pause, she added,
And the captain of the guard, Murad Bey. There. See how I sewed it up?
she said, letting go of the sleeve.
Remember me by it, and wear it in good health.
Shibble looked at her and laughed. They talked a while longer. Then the women set off, and Shibble walked with them to where the forest ended and the open plain began. When this happened, it was spring. Here and there in the ravines, fresh beech leaves had turned green, but on the other trees there were only buds. Shibble was heading back into the mountain and was still smiling. Behind him walked the brigands, staring at the ground in silence. A black raven flew over them and croaked, a bad omen. Shibble did not notice, but the brigands drew together in a knot and whispered among themselves. A woman had crossed their path, a beautiful woman, and none of it boded well. Some more time passed, and the weather grew warmer. The wild plums blossomed, the pear trees came into leaf, and one day, amid the warm air and the sunshine, a cuckoo called. As was the custom, Shibble began to count, to see how many years he would live. But then he thought about his age, and it seemed to him that he was already old. He remembered Rada and smiled.
What an extraordinary mixture,
He thought.
of woman, child, and devil, and how everything suits her. She says something, it's clever. She does something, it's lovely.
And he could see her just as he had seen her when she held the needle and thread in her lips, looking at him and smiling.
Not a needle.
Shibble thought again and sighed.
She could hold a knife in her lips like that, and a man would gladly die by that knife.
Just at that time, some merchants passed, and the brigands stopped them. Frightened, sallow as straw, they could barely stay in their saddles, and waited to hear what Shibble would say. But Shibble did not make them open their saddlebags, nor did he search for what was in their money belts. From a distance he struck up conversation about this and that, mentioned Veliko Kahaya, and at last began to speak of Rada. The brigands stared at the ground, burning with shame. Shibble let the merchants go on their way, walked with them a stretch, and loudly charged them to carry his warm greetings to Rada. The brigands no longer spoke a word to Shibble, nor dared to look him in the eye. And when that evening they returned to the mountain, to the summit of the blue stones, among the eagles' nests, and Shibble lay down and fell asleep, they stayed around the fire and talked. The mountain was the same, their refuge was secure, and yet they were uneasy, glancing about with fearful eyes. A fox screamed somewhere. They thought a man was coughing. A twig snapped. They thought someone was coming. And they leaned closer to one another, whispering, watching Shibble toss in his sleep, groan and mumble something. Then they rose and readied themselves to leave. They did not kill him, but they fled from him as one flees from a man stricken with the plague. Shibble was left alone, and then the money from the imperial treasuries he had robbed, the rings things wrenched from the hands of the living and the dead, the gold and silver from churches and monasteries, all the riches he had hoarded and hidden in caves and hollow trees, all of it flowed to the house of Veliko Kehaya, all gifts for Rada, precious gifts for every word of greeting she sent him. But then he received a message that made his head spin. Rada was calling him to come down to the village. Her father gave them his blessing. Murad Bey pardoned him, and as a pledge that his word was true, the captain of the guard sent him a Holy Land rosary of amber. For a long time, Shibil wondered whether it was a trap. Everything he had given away, and the forest had turned fully green by now, heavy and dark. The meadows were covered with tall grass. The peony bloomed, and the rosemary bloomed too, the fairy flower. Through the ravines drifted the scent of lilac and linden, and when the bellow of a stag echoed through the shady hollows, and wood pigeons cooed in the old grove, the stone on which Shibil laid his head each night felt hard, and his rifle felt heavy. He could bear it no longer, and set out for the village. When he left the blue stones, it was noon. When he reached the road below and looked back, the peaks of the mountain and the cliffs upon them had flushed red with the setting sun, but the eagles still circled before the white screes and the stone walls of the precipices. Those eagles, accustomed to carrion, which so often, perched on some crag, had torn at human flesh. Dusk was falling. A bluish mist descended into the ravines. Long shadows crept along the ridges. The mountain had grown still, silent, pensive, as though it watched Shibil go and asked, where? Shibil's heart ached, and doubt gnawed at it like a worm. He sat down on a rock and fell into thought, and he turned everything over in his mind again, weighed everything anew. When he raised his eyes, the moon had risen. A different world lay before Shibil, and the mountain had changed, spread wide, dim, smoothed like a blue wall, draped in a white veil. The forests hid in black shadows. From the meadows came coolness, and white mist crept over them, coiling like a dragon. Somewhere in the darkness, a firefly glimmered, inscribed a sign in a fiery line, some secret word, and went out. And deep in the ravine, something was singing. Was it the river? Singing so softly, so beautifully. Shibil gazed before him and thought, in his eyes like short yellow threads, the moonbeams broke and sparkled, weaving themselves into a dim image that now appeared, now vanished. But Shibil clearly saw two eyes watching him, a smile that beckoned. He rose, followed those eyes and that smile, and did not look back again. 3 cautious knocks, a soft whisper.
It's me, Mustafa.
The door opens, and he enters his father's house. A fire burned on the hearth. Shadows played on the walls, on the heads of Shibil's pistols, on the cartridge pouches and the tassels of his bandolier. Reflections glinted. Tall and powerfully built, the house seemed too small for him. He met his mother's eyes and understood all the anguish that tormented her.
Mustafa,
She said,
why have you come? Will you go there?
I will.
You'll go. When?
Tomorrow.
The old woman knew her son well and knew it was useless to insist, to try to talk him out of it. She sat down by the fire, clasped her knees with her arms, sank her eyes to the ground, and began.
Mustafa, for 3 days the captain's guards have been casting bullets and sharpening their knives. They test the blades with a finger to see if they're sharp. They lay a hair across the edge, and it splits in 2. And they twist their mustaches and look toward our house. Mustafa, something terrible is going to happen.
Shibil turned and looked at her, but his gaze was such that she could not tell whether he had heard her, whether he had understood. She shrank back and said nothing more, and Shibil was unbuckling his belt and taking from himself pistols with gilded handles, knives with curved blades, cartridge pouches worked in silver, all of it which for him was now a heavy and useless burden. Up at the church cafe by the open window sat the captain of the guard, Murad Bey, and Veliko Kahaya. The Bey was frowning, silent, pensively sucking on his long pipe, but Veliko Kahaya was cheerful. He paced the room, flapping the wide bottoms of his shalvari trousers, pulling from his bright silk sash every now and then a watch as big as a ball, glancing at it and tucking it away again. Then he rubbed his hands and said,
"Everything is arranged, Bey Effendi. Rest easy. The wolf is in the trap."
On the table before the captain lay 2 kerchiefs, one white, one red. These were the signal for the guards hidden in ambush. If the Bey waved the white kerchief from the window, it meant mercy. If he waved the red, it meant death, and they waited, glancing toward the street. No one was in sight. Rada had not come out to the gate, nor could Mustafa be seen approaching. Veliko Kahaya could not contain himself and dashed home.
Well?
Asked the Bey when he returned.
"Everything is in order. She's put on her finest, a scarlet satin bodice, a blue silk frock, just the way she was dressed when we sent her into the mountains. And she's a woman after all. She gazes into the mirror, pencils her brows, and laughs."
What is there to laugh about?
Said the Bey irritably.
Doesn't she know what is going to happen?
"She knows, of course she knows."
Did you tell her everything?
I didn't tell her everything. How could I? But no, I told her everything. Effendi, don't you worry. Everything is in order.
Another hour passed. No one came. Veliko Kahaya ran home again, lingered longer this time, and at last returned.
Well?
Asked the Bey.
Forget it. Now it's something else. She's crying. That witch, his mother, came by. If I caught her, I'd have taught her a lesson. She came by, Effendi, and who knows what she babbled. Now Rada wrings her hands and weeps. "I won't let a hair fall from his head," she says. "I'll go to him. I'll run off with him into the mountains." Ah, women! That's how they are. Never mind, I set her straight. She'll come out. Any moment now you'll see her at the gate.
The captain stroked his beard and said nothing. Blue rings of smoke curled and coiled around his head. But look, Rada stood at the gate, and from below came Mustafa. The captain and Veliko Kahaya rushed to the window, hid behind the curtain, watching with bated breath. Mustafa walked down the middle of the street. Sunlight shone on rooftops, on fruit trees. Far away at the end of the street, the mountains were visible, where Mustafa had been king. He carried no weapons, but how finely he was dressed. Clothes of blue Brasov broadcloth, silver braid and gold. Slender and tall, a little thinner, a little darker, but handsome and proud. In his hands, an amber rosary and a sprig of red carnation, the rosary from the Bey, the carnation from Rada. He was close now, looking toward Rada, gazing at her, smiling. The Bey tugged at his white beard and murmured,
What a hero. What a handsome man.
"The kerchief, Bey Effendi, the kerchief!"
cried Veliko Kahaya.
What a hero.
The Bey repeated, lost in wonder.
What a handsome man.
Veliko Kahaya snatched the red kerchief and ran to the window. The Bey seized his arm.
No, squire. Such a man must not die.
"And my daughter, and my honor!"
cried Veliko Kahaya, tore himself free, went to the window, and waved the red kerchief. Rifles cracked, window panes rang, the houses shuddered, and upon the earth a black shadow seemed to fall. Shibble stopped, fearsome, beautiful. He snapped the rosary apart, but he did not throw away the carnation. He crossed his arms over his chest and waited. A moment, two, just time enough for the guards to reload. A sharp scream rose from the lower quarter. Shibble did not flinch. Another scream from the gate of Veliko Kahaya's house. Shibble turned. It was Rada. She was running toward him, stretching out her arms as if to shield him. He opened his arms as if to embrace her. Rifles cracked again. Shibble fell, first on his face, then onto his back, and beside him fell Rada, and everything grew still. The sun shone on the cobblestones, like a spot of blood between the two bodies. The carnation glowed red. From the church cafe, from the window, someone was desperately waving a white kerchief.